Hello, I'm Africa 54 Managing Editor Vincent McCory in for Hashtag of the Yacht. It's Wednesday, July the 26th. And this is Africa 54. The Sudan conflict sends more than 100,000 South Sudanese back to their home country, according to the United Nations. Conservationists in Kenya worry that the recent lifting of a ban on logging is reversing gains made to lessen extreme weather. And a new X logo replaces Twitter's famous blue bird. Paul Ndiho speaks with a tech analyst on what this might point to. All this and more on today's Africa 54. Niger's President Mohamed Bazoum was detained by members of the Presidential Guard on Wednesday, prompting regional fears of an attempted coup. The African Union has condemned what it referred to as, quote, an attempted coup d'etat. In a message on Twitter, AU Chief Musa Faki Mohammed accused the soldiers of acting in total betrayal of their republican duty. ECOWAS also condemned the attempted coup. And just a short time ago, Stefan Dujarric, a spokesperson of the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, said in a statement that Guterres condemns in the strongest terms possible any effort to seize power by force and to undermine democratic governance, peace and stability in Niger. VOA's Paul Ndiho has more.
On Wednesday, members of Niger's Presidential Guard sealed off the residence and office of the President, Mohamed Bazoum. A source close to Bazoum described the move as a feat of temper by the elite troops and that the talks were underway. There was no abnormal military deployment or sounds of gunfire in the area, and traffic was normal. A statement from the presidency said, quote, some members of the Presidential Guard had started an anti-republican movement in vain, and that the National Army was ready to tackle them if they did not come to their senses. The statement added that President Mohamed Bazoum and his family were well, after security sources said that presidential guards were holding Bazoum inside the presidential palace. The landlocked West African state is one of the most coup-prone nations in the world, experiencing 4 coups since independence from France in 1960 and numerous attempted coups. Bazoum, a close ally of France, was democratically elected in 2021. The country's last coup occurred in February 2010, overturning President Mahamadou Tanja. According to a security source, there was an attempted coup on March 31, 2021, just 2 days before Bazoum's inauguration. Regional analysts say Niger is struggling with 2 Islamist militant campaigns, one in the southwest, which swept in from neighboring Mali in 2015, and the other in the southeast involving extremists based in northern Nigeria. Hundreds of thousands have fled their homes, stoking a humanitarian crisis and straining the economy. Paul Ndiho, VOA News, Washington.
The United Nations says more than 100,000 South Sudanese living in Sudan have returned to their home country since Sudan's conflict erupted in April. That number is growing rapidly, with an average of 1,000 more refugees arriving each day. Henry Wilkins reports from Renk, South Sudan.
The town of Renk in northern South Sudan is accessible only by a long boat ride or plane from the capital Juba, but it's connected to Sudan's capital Khartoum by a paved road. Since Sudan's war erupted in April, the food and goods that used to arrive along the road have stopped coming. South Sudanese who fled to Sudan years ago for refuge from their own country's civil war arrive instead. They are in desperate need of help. Francis James Hakim says his journey here was perilous as they passed checkpoints run by the Sudanese army and the paramilitary group the army is at war with, the Rapid Support Forces, or RSF.
On the way, we found the Rapid Support Forces. They checked and searched us thoroughly. If you have ID, no problem. But if you tell them that you are Sudanese, it's a problem for sure. The only solution is bribery. If you have enough money, they let you go.
Many returnees like Hakim identify as Sudanese because they have lived there most or sometimes all of their lives, but do not have citizenship. Hakim left South Sudan when he was a toddler. More than 100,000 returnees have arrived in South Sudan, mostly through Renk, since Sudan's conflict began. But having escaped the fighting, they are faced with a new set of problems. Lan Aik is a community leader among the returnees.
We came from Khartoum, but the problem facing us now, instead of insecurity, is that we do not have enough to eat. We also have a problem with shelter. It's the rainy season. Everyone here is living without proper shelter.
The UN says roughly 1,000 people are arriving to Renk each day, with no end in sight to Sudan's war.
Yeah, but we do expect more as we hear that the conflict is intensifying, increasing and spreading across South Kordofan and other parts of Sudan. We are expecting much more. The rains have not helped. They're preparing for cholera. Measles cases have already started being reported.
Although the returnees are citizens, the South Sudanese government does not want them to stay in Renk. They are being relocated to other parts of the country where, because they are citizens, they will have access to the labour market and have at least some hope of supporting themselves. Most say they want to get out of Renk, which is starved of resources to support them due to access difficulties and lack of funding, as soon as possible.
They need to clear these returnee sites so we can live peacefully. The conditions here are very challenging. People are living outside and they're suffering. You can see the reality.
Yet, as the UN and local authorities struggle to relocate the huge numbers arriving, it's unclear how long she will have to remain in the limbo of Renk. Henry Wilkins for VOA News, Renk, South Sudan.
Well, African leaders often say Africa's problems need African solutions. The continent is currently grappling with a raging war in Sudan, conflict in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, a migrant crisis in North Africa, as well as coups and attempted military coups in West Africa. For more insight on Africa's challenges, I'm joined by Nyaka Lagoke, Assistant Professor of History and Pan-Africanist Studies at Lincoln University in Pennsylvania. Professor, welcome to Africa 54.
Well, thank you very much, Vincent, for the opportunity.
You're welcome. Now, I want to start with, there was a gathering of African leaders at the Africa Union in Addis Ababa in February. And actually right there, the chairman of the Commission of the Africa Union, Musa Faki, made a call for the need for Pan-Africanism of the member states. And he said the countries should avoid the paradigm in which they see folded arms and when their houses or the neighbor's house are burning. Why did he say that? What is the issue or the challenge with having Pan-Africanism in 2023?
Thanks very much for the opportunity. It is a big question, and I'm going to go very fast. Pan-Africanism is back. That's the reality, at least in the narratives of the leaders. It's not just about the activists. It's not about intellectualists, also at the level of the states. Mm-hmm. I think the turning point was when the African Union launched the Africa 2063, and also with the rise to power of Mandela and Thabo Mbeki. Thabo Mbeki coined a variant of Pan-Africanism, which was the African Renaissance. So since then, many African leaders are trying. And then today, we can see that there are leaders who are taking the initiative. William Ruto in Kenya is seen today as a great Pan-Africanist. The president of Mali, Assimi Goïta, standing to the French neocolonialism. In Togo, under the leadership of the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Togo, Togo is about to organize next year the 9th Pan-African Congress in Lomé. Yeah. And then you can see that Ghana is going to organize a second conference on reparations. Yeah. So things are going in the same direction, and then leaders are speaking what they're speaking the
So
truth.
One of the other issues that they've raised is the fact that there are conflicts, for example, on the continent, and these leaders actually point to that have not been resolved up to this point. And what is happening, perhaps that we don't know behind the scenes, that could be actually maybe yielding some positive results and we're not aware of? Yeah, for example, the conflict in Sudan.
Oh, yeah, conflict in Sudan, or let's say talk about Ivory Coast and Mali. When the Malians saw some soldiers, Ivorian soldiers at the airport with weapons, and there was tension on both sides. And that crisis was resolved. So you don't hear too much about those kind of things. And it is not always about Africans killing each other. The war in Ukraine, it is not on the African continent. It's been going on for 1 year. And the Europeans and America, no one is able to resolve that issue. So my point is that there is an African story, a tale of African hope that we don't always hear about. Even the question of migrants is not always what we see. People on the continent of Africa, they're moving like across borders, but we only see those who are dying in the Mediterranean. So for me, it's about the story, it's about the image, it's about what the media is portraying.
So despite the portrayal of the media, do you sense that actually there is progress in, for example, dealing with those issues as a continental body, for example, the African Union, or is this an effort by individual countries?
No, my point is this. I said that several times when I came here to Voice of America. It is not easy to be an African leader. It's not easy to be an African. So when you see all those forces, the West or the East in the past, and today we can see China back in Africa, we see Russia back in Africa, we see America still in Africa, and we see the European powers. Africa has always been the battleground of all those powers. So, of course, all the things are impacting somehow negatively the welfare of the African people on the daily basis. Of course, we have our own flaws, our own weaknesses, and our no limitations. But my point is that there are things that are going on, and then we do not always try to talk about that. So I gave you the case of Ivory Coast and Mali. Even when there was the Ivorian crisis, it was resolved somehow.
Briefly talk about that. We are seeing thousands of youth trying to leave the continent, but the African Union says they're creating jobs on the continent. What is challenging that dream to come true so that young people can stay home?
No, it is not easy. It is difficult, and I know. But this is a problem you cannot resolve one day.
Yeah.
My point is that, let's see, have you done a show on Aliko Dangote's refinery in Nigeria?
Not yet.
No, not yet.
Yeah.
That is that's part of the problem.
Yeah.
So these are the stories we want to see. And then things like that are happening, and we always see media talking about hopelessness and helplessness in Africa. And I think that there is a story, an African story, that needs to be highlighted.
And we'll continue telling the stories. We really appreciate your analysis today. Professor Lagoke is an assistant professor of history and Pan-African studies at Lincoln University in Pennsylvania. Now to East Africa, Kenyan conservationists are petitioning the state to enact solutions to avoid the worst impact from climate change, including record droughts and flooding. Activists say the recent lifting of a ban on logging is reversing gains made to lessen extreme weather linked to climate change. Victoria Munga reports from Nairobi.
Sote Lokotos has lived in this shelter in Baringo County, Kenya, for a decade now. Before this, she lived with her family on a farm. One night in 2013, water from a nearby lake engulfed their home. Fortunately, everyone escaped.
The water swept away everything. It flooded our house. I was separated from my other children. I live with my husband here and only one child.
Families like Lokotosis are bearing the brunt of climate change. It has affected millions around the world and is being felt every day in Kenya, where disasters like flooding and droughts have become more common over the past 20 years. Activists are demanding the Kenyan government commit to real solutions to prevent and minimize such catastrophes.
We are trying to provide solutions and push for policy to act on, for instance, loss and damage.
Kenya's President William Ruto lifted a 6-year ban on logging in July to create more jobs in timber harvesting. To conservationists, the decision undermines efforts to mitigate climate change as trees store carbon dioxide that contributes to global warming. But timber traders like Michael Oginga praised the move.
Let them lift the ban so we can at least go back to our normal business. Business is low. I can get 1 customer a week. I could get about 10 customers a week before the ban. This is what we depend on for food.
Global temperatures have already risen an average of 1.1 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, according to the United Nations. Droughts have become more chronic in the Horn of Africa, displacing millions of people, sinking them into poverty and hunger. Aid group Minority Rights Group International is trying to help villagers in Kenya cope with the changes.
They need to adapt, so they need to change the ways they use soil. They need to make conscious choices around farming practices, how they cultivate, how to plant trees.
Environmentalists say by adopting new policies at both the governmental and the individual level, Kenya can guard against many of the worst impacts of climate change. Victoria Amunga for VOA News, Nairobi.
Delays equals denial. Act in time.
We're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54 and all VOA Africa programs on our website at voaafrica.com. Still to come, Elon Musk makes a Twitter logo change. We'll be right back.
This week on Straight Talk Africa. The second Russia-Africa summit begins on Thursday as African leaders prepare to meet their Russian counterparts in St. Petersburg. We'll look at how much Russia really invests in Africa. Can a country at war, facing over 300 sanctions with a stagnating economic footprint in Africa, really be a reliable, promising trade and investment partner to the continent? Join me, Heidi Adams, on the next Straight Talk Africa as we discuss the Russia-Africa Summit.
In other news, the World Food Programme in Malawi says a funding shortfall has forced it to cut by 50% food rations for more than 50,000 people at the country's only refugee camp. The food cuts come at a time when refugees at Nzaleka camp are complaining of inadequate food assistance, a situation that has forced some of the refugees to voluntarily return home. Tensions are rising in Botswana between the LGBTQ and Christian communities after members of the evangelical church community organized a march over the weekend against a bill that could decriminalize same-sex relations. The tensions come ahead of a National Assembly debate that is expected to begin this week on the controversial bill. And in their second Group C encounter on Wednesday, pre-tournament favorite Spain became one of the first teams to seal qualifications for the Women's World Cup knockouts after a 5-0 win over debutant Zambia. Zambia was only one of the 4 African nations represented in the tournament, including Morocco, Nigeria, and South Africa. Now, Arsenal Football Club returned to the United States for their 2023-2024 season preparations. The team played its first game against the Major League Soccer All-Stars here in Washington, and the Rwandan embassy hosted former Arsenal players as part of a partnership the country has forged with Arsenal Football Club. VOA's Edward Rema reports.
Arsenal, a professional soccer club that is coming off their best season in years, played their first exhibition game on Wednesday night, beating the Major League Soccer All-Star team at Awudi Field in Washington 5-0. As part of the Rwanda-Arsenal partnership, the Rwanda Embassy in DC hosted the players for an event on July 17th. Among the guests were team legends Ray Parler and Laurent Bissam Etam-Mayer. Parler says he's happy about the tour and has a message to Arsenal supporters.
It's going to be an interesting tour, and this is a very important time for any footballer. Pre-season is very, very important that you you get up to speed before the Premier League starts.
A former midfielder with Arsenal, Pala was on one of former soccer manager Arsene Wenger's iconic team that did not lose a single game during the 2003-2004 Premier League season. Pala says the good old days are back at Arsenal, and he attributes this to the team's performance last year and the new signings that include Declan Rice, the team's defensive midfielder.
He's a leader, which you need a lot of leaders all over the pitch to be successful. So he's going to be a real star going forward. He's a really good lad. I'm sure the Arsenal fans can't wait to see him on the opening day or in America.
This excitement is also shared by his former teammate Cameroonian Laurent Bissan Etame Mayel, who hopes to see more young talents from Africa.
They've been doing a lot in order to give that talent that we are talking about a chance to play in the highest level. And I believe in the long period, this will happen, and I will see more African countries play in the highest level. I will see more youngsters with that kind of talent play in the highest competition. As we always been seeing, but we'll see more and more. So it's a matter of time. We have to be patient.
The North London club has had a partnership with Rwanda since 2018 in a deal worth $40 million, according to officials. Human rights advocates and exiled critics say the soccer team shouldn't partner with the Rwandan government, which has a checkered human rights record. Rwanda is accused of a heavy-handed approach in cracking down on any form of opposition against its ruling party or its leader, President Paul Kagame. But Rwandan ambassador Matilde Mukantabana says despite criticism over that massive investment, the deal is bearing fruit.
That partnership has helped to continue to grow our tourism, our conferences, and so on and so forth. So definitely it was a very consequential decision, and it has been a win-win type of partnership. The Arsenals are winning, and we are winning as a country.
Former soccer player Paula also calls it a win-win partnership. It is because of such relations that he was able to visit Rwanda, a government tourism initiative.
Well, it's certainly it's sort of around the world people see Visit Rwanda on the Arsenal shirt, and we all know football's such a big, powerful tool all around the world. So the partnership's been great from Arsenal's point of view. Rwanda, I'm sure there's been a lot more tourism going through Rwanda because of Arsenal. After their Wednesday game against the Major League Soccer All-Star team managed by former Manchester United star Wayne Rooney, Arsenal players will face off with Barcelona, the La Liga champions, and domestic rivals Manchester United. This summer's trip is the second consecutive summer Arsenal has visited the United States. Eddie Ruema, VOA News, Washington.
Well, in our technology reports, Elon Musk unveils a new logo to replace Twitter's famous blue bird. For more insight on the change, Africa 54 tech reporter Paul Ndiho spoke to Adedoyin Adedeji, a Nigerian-based tech analyst.
Welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you for having me today.
Let's get right to it. You are one of the leading tech analysts in Nigeria. I want to get your thoughts on Twitter rebranding to X.
Twitter rebranding to X, I think it's something that personally, I did expect that it's going to happen at some point because I'm one of those people that have always followed Elon Musk's history, being an innovator, being an inventor, being a businessman. I think he's one of those few people that I truly do admire for what they've achieved, and so he's one of those few people, especially in tech and innovation and creativity, that I do follow their story over time. You will likely want to convert Twitter into a social media / commerce platform. So, and I think the first major step towards that is what he has done by renaming the platform from Twitter to X, and also changing all the Twitter bets are going now. So the era of the Twitter bets are going now. So I think we are getting to that new era. But I think personally, he hasn't done well with Twitter in the last month since he acquired it. That's my own personal opinion. In terms of features, in terms of some of the policies he has put in place, they are not very popular features. For example, limiting of tweets and trying to over-commercialize social media. And I think Twitter gave him that easier launch, meaning that Twitter already has a huge database, has a huge user base, So for him to launch his new platform.
You are an avid Twitter user. You are so hooked into this tech ecosystem. You know what's going on. There are some critics who have said that rebranding Twitter might be a disaster for him, or he might be a genius, and this is probably the only way he can revive Twitter. What do you think about those concerns?
I think those concerns are valid on both sides of the divide, whether for those that are predicting a doom or those that are predicting innovation. I think the predictions are right on both sides. So I think one of the few things that I think as a reason for this new development is the issue of copyright. But let's say it goes, because there are a number of things that some companies hold some rights to the use of X as a social media platform and all that. So because I know for example, like Microsoft, they have their Xbox. Okay, so I also know that Facebook also has some patent around X. Of course, the only thing I think he has going on for him right now is that he has the x.com domain, which Twitter will likely be switched to. So they bought the x.com when they left PayPal. PayPal allowed him to acquire x.com. So he has always kept it ever since then, several years ago. One thing is this. You have to understand the usage demography of Twitter as it is. Okay, I came on Twitter for social media, not for commerce. Okay, so if you want to move it into the realm of commerce, the question is, the audience on Twitter, are they ready for that? Is it something they want to do? That's one side. Okay, so I might not, for example, the audience on an Amazon platform, for example, is different from the audience on LinkedIn. It's different from the audience on Twitter. It's different from the audience on Instagram. So audience matters a lot. It's one of those few tests that Elon Musk would have to pass for him to make his money back on the platform.
As tech advances, there's going to be a lot of risks when it comes to us as consumers and the people putting this technology out there. Do you think there should be, like, let's say, cause for concern? Should governments jump in and try to regulate some of this technology?
I'm up for governments reviewing social media processes. That's the process for social media operations. I'm against full regulation, because once you start talking about regulation for government, it means a whole ball game entirely. Okay, so it means that the government wants to have their hands on everything, create guidelines, and back it up by legislation for social media companies to follow, and also to guide them on what to do. Let's see what Elon Musk will do with X. So hopefully we'll be able to get our Everything app, where we can do everything we do daily on one app.
Thank you so much for your time.
Yes. Thank you for having me today.
Well, that was VOA Tech reporter Paul Ndio speaking with Adedoyin Adedeji, a Nigerian-based tech analyst. Thank you. Have a good night.